Hello, I'm Carol Talbot, the creator and founder of the Possibility Hub, taking you beyond the boundaries of who you believe yourself to be and opening to new possibilities. My guest in this episode is Judith Quin, known as the Voice Woman. A multi-award-winning vocal confidence and communication specialist, Judith helps people speak with clarity, confidence and conviction in any situation. She's the creator of the Whole Voice Method, a holistic approach that embraces the mental, physical, energetic and emotional elements that impact how you share your voice. So let's find out more. Hello, Judith, and welcome to the Possibility Hub podcast series. I'm delighted to have you on here because the voice, utilizing the voice is something I'm a big advocate of. And of course, you come from being a classically trained actress, so you're used to being on stage and using your voice. Was that always the case?
Pretty much, yes. I was never backward in coming forward, even as a child. So my first memory of proper performance, in inverted commas, I would have been probably 4 because it was at preschool, and I played Mary in the nativity play, and Robert Lott was Joseph, and Simon Cooper was the innkeeper, and and then when I was 7 or 8, I played Scott of the Antarctic for a school of class assembly. We did adaptations of fairy tales with my friends at the end of term, and I always ended up playing the princes. And then end of infant school, so I would have been 8 before I went up to middle school, the nativity was being cast, and I was very miffed because I wasn't Mary, and I knew I wasn't going to be the angel Gabriel because I wasn't blonde. I had the dark brown hair. The red is a color I choose now. And so I went to the headmistress and I said, well, you've cast whoever it was as Mary, and I'm not going to be Gabriel because I'm not blonde. Why can't a girl play one of the 3 wise men? So I was Balthazar. So that's
even in those early days, for what
even in those and even things like my name. So I remember being about 6 maybe, and Mrs. Goodall, the lovely playground assistant, called me Judy, and I just went, my name is Judith, not Judy. So I never had any qualms about speaking up, especially if it was something I felt passionate about, and very much so speaking up for others and for things that I felt were unjust. So yes, I am one of those rare people who has always been very confident speaking up for myself, speaking about myself, speaking in public. However,
yes, what about the singing?
There was a vocal confidence challenge, and that was singing. I loved singing. Loved singing. And really, if you'd asked me when I was sort of 8 or 9, knowing I wanted to perform for a living, thanks, I think, in large amounts to both The Sound of Music and The Kids from Fame, I would have said I wanted to be in musical theatre. I loved it. And singing was what used to get people rolling their eyes at me or going, oh God, she's singing again. There's a very specific incident for the school singing competition where I was singing Memories, because, it was the mid-80s and Cats was the big thing. And in my singing lessons with my singing teacher, not a problem, note perfect. On stage with all the nerves, my body was shaking, and when your body shakes, your voice shakes, and so you will not hit notes. And I'm there super vulnerable, and this is the challenge with sharing your voice. The difficulty people have is that whether it is speaking about yourself, whether it is speaking up for your work, whether it is public speaking, whatever form that may take for you, whether it is singing in any shape or form, it's really vulnerable, and your voice will show any vulnerabilities. So my nerves were showing through my voice, and I remember to this day, I must have been 14, maybe 15, And Fergus Knight and someone else he was stood next to, can't remember, Timothy Wayland, that's who it was, laughing at the back of the hall. Like literally, just in that teenage boy way, right?
Yes, and it creates big scars. You know, I can also
Mm-hmm.
really resonate with that because I loved singing. Like you, I won a talent competition at school by reciting a very long poem and sort of really enacting it as well, not just reciting it, but really, you know, putting emotion and play into it. And I remember when I went to another school, I loved singing, auditioned for the choir, and everybody got through. It was kind of like a done deal.
Mm.
I didn't. And, you know, that kind of like crushed a lot of dreams for me at the time. And so those things can color you when you're criticized for your voice. And of course, you know, we're both on stages, public speaking as well. And you know so well that, you know, you can get 99% love you, but there's one or two people who say, terrible.
Yeah.
And it just you focus on the ones who, you know, that's the criticism, rather than taking it as, well, I'm not everybody's cup of tea and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I'm sure these are the types of people that you've also worked with, ones who can't express their voice, but have also had bad experiences like you and me, where, you know, people laughing or, you know, especially children can be very cruel. And
Mm-hmm.
that sort of creates a pattern into later life, doesn't it?
Completely. And most of the work I do is not with singers, and not even with public speakers. Some people come to me because they are having to do some kind of public speaking, whether that's a presentation at work or they've been asked to speak at a conference. But most of the people I work with come to me because they find it's either simply speaking up in a team meeting challenging, sharing their ideas, having a voice, or because they need to speak about themselves positively with confidence. So that might be they're looking for a new job or a promotion and they're having to go to interview, and you need to be able to say, yeah, actually, this is who I am, this is what I do, I'm really good at XYZ. Or they run their own business and they know they need to speak about themselves and their business more positively with more confidence, whether that is online, whether that's accepting being a guest on a podcast like this, whether
Yes.
that is doing little videos or simply going networking and again being able to talk about themselves. And this is the power. Like most people don't have to do public speaking in life. There's a guy who is on the edge of working with me, but his challenges around sharing his voice are so much. After he saw me speak, I think it was last year, the first time, he said, oh my goodness, if I'd met you 10 years ago, I'd probably be earning £250,000 a year or more extra, because I've spent my whole life avoiding any role where I would have to speak up in front of anyone. And that includes like simply managing larger teams, let alone not even presentations and public speaking.
And can you
So,
imagine the stress that creates in the
oh,
body as well? Because, you know, again, when you can't express yourself fully, you know, there's different levels of expression, whether you're expressing from the head, the heart, the gut, it changes the resonance of your voice and the energy that you're projecting as well. But again, when it's putting you into negative emotions, that's creating stress in the body. And I'm sure you see that in people that their physiology literally shrinks down. And it opens beautifully when they can start to express and find their voice. It's like finding yourself, isn't it?
oh, so much. And actually, one of the deep exercises I do with people. So a lot of speaking coaches will work from the externals. They'll focus on pace, pitch, posture, projection, where you're standing, how you're standing, what you're saying. That's important stuff. But it's like giving you a hat, a coat, a scarf, and a bag and saying, there you go, off you go and speak. And you arrive where you're going to speak and you take off your hat, you hang up your coat, you take off your scarf, you put down your bag, and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm naked. Because actually you haven't been given the underwear and the clothes. And the underwear and the clothes are really looking at yourself and getting to know yourself. So one of the deep exercises I do is we work from the physiological. So we work from the body. So when you think about this speaking situation, whatever that speaking situation is, one lady came to work with me because she wanted to be able to speak up at work. But one of the measures she used was she wanted to be able to order her food in a restaurant without the waiter or waitress saying, sorry, 3 times. And that was one thing, like everyday ways of your voice being limited. So when we work from the physiological, just why to support my acting career, I was a massage therapist. So it's very handy. I can see where people are holding tension in their body. And we work. Yeah.
Interesting to put the two together. And of course, yes. In fact, I was just speaking to somebody yesterday and said, you know, have you ever had that experience where you're going for a deep tissue massage and suddenly you feel emotions or tears coming up because we store them in the body, and a deep tissue massage can sort of release things, as can your voice.
Yeah. And then with the voice, so with that in combination, what is most fascinating to me when I started doing this, so I started doing this back in 2011. And yes, very often there's a trigger in there from something that happened. Very often, 85, 90% of my clients between the ages of 4 and 16 at school. But mostly what's really interesting is so often it's not actually to do with being in a speaking situation. It might not, it's not about having to stand up and speak. So often it can be something. One client's example was she had drawn a picture of a guy who works down the mines, so of a miner, and she grew up in Australia. And she had 3 colored crayons, so she gave him purple trousers. And
Works for me.
Yeah, exactly, right? And the teacher, from doing this exercise that I do, because I was like, how do you feel in those speaking situations? How physiologically, what happens? Where's the tension? So we work from that. And she's like, oh, well, it's here and here. I'm like, how familiar is that to you? Oh, it's really familiar. Okay, so I just want you to go mentally to the first time you remember it. And normally that sort of goes back to an early job experience or a university experience. And then we go into, and how familiar was that to you then? And that's normally when I get the, oh my goodness, yeah, it was familiar to me then. And that's when the light bulb comes. And for this woman, she went, oh my goodness, it's that art class. Because I would never have equated this to speaking, but it's exactly the same physical reaction as when I'd drawn this picture. The teacher held it up and said, what kind of miner wears pink pants? And the whole class laughed. So her self-expression has been laughed at.
Wow. So you've developed the whole voice method. And so the whole voice method is, it sounds like it's more than just getting people to speak on stage. It's a whole therapy, an intervention for people to clear things that have happened in their past that maybe they're not aware are actually triggers and holding them back from fully expressing themselves. So that's part, I imagine what you've just said is part of the whole voice method. And how do you get people to start utilizing their voice? Because many people, when you talk about voice coach, or, you know, speaking with confidence and finding your voice, think of singing. And, you know, as you said, you know, sometimes singing puts people into, oh, I couldn't sing in public. Oh, and instantly I've just been invited to join a choir here. So I will be singing. It'll start in September. But going back to, I know what I started with, I never used to like the sound of my voice when I was doing any recording and it was being edited. I said, oh, pitch it down, pitch it down. You know, when back in the old days with a telephone answering machine.
Yeah.
You know, I'd record it 6 times or first thing in the morning when my voice was a little lower. And I remember working with somebody that you would have heard of, Stuart Pearce.
I also worked with Stuart. That's, I think, when we first met, we had that connection.
Yeah, so, and it was so beautiful in his Muse Cottage in London. And it was somewhere during the talking and the toning that very subtly my voice did change, because I remember recording after that. And when they'd done the editing, I said, oh, did you pitch it down already? And he said, we didn't touch it, Carol. And it was the first time that I thought, I like my voice. I like my voice. So do you incorporate toning as an integral part, and make the difference between singing, toning, and kind of like finding where your natural maybe pitch is or where it's stuck, which chakra?
Yes, it's the short answer. Yes, emphatically.
So let's go into the long answer.
So, yeah, the whole point, so many people don't like the sound of their own voice. And very often because it is recorded. And we have to remember that our recorded voice is different to our natural voice because it's going through machine. Excuse me, I'm going to have to cough. I had a nut earlier and it's tickling the back of my throat. So I'm just going to turn off my mic.
So I'll carry on speaking because we're going to be getting Judith's whole voice method.
Yes, I am here.
Not.
But it's little things like that, actually. There's a prime example of really simple everyday vocal confidence. Having the confidence to say, oh, I'm really sorry, I'm just going to need some time. So many people would have battled against the tickle in the back of the throat until they're closing their throat until their eyes were watering
and they're all red.
It's an interview, I can't interrupt it. It's simply being able to hold space, to take up time and space. And using your voice to do that is so important. And not liking the sound of your own voice is so common. So yes, sounding is absolutely integral to the work. I call it different things depending who I'm with.
Yeah.
So I've taken sounding, which I call toning, because it's not, I don't use specific tones. I let people find their tones for their voice. So I'm not saying like the root chakra is this note or this sound. It's actually, where is it for you? And where is it for you today? And let's play with getting to know your voice differently and learning to accept your voice in all of its space without you judging your voice. Because the fear of speaking, there's no such thing as a fear of speaking. Absolute tosh. Like this whole public speaking is the number one fear over death. There is no such thing as a fear of speaking. What people are afraid of is being negatively judged. They're afraid of being seen, right? That vulnerability of, if I'm standing up here, if I'm sharing my voice in whatever way that is, people will see my fears. They will see that I'm making this up. They'll see whatever it is they don't want people to see. And the fear of the unknown. I've never done this before, or I've not spoken to this audience. I don't know how I'm going to be received, which links back into the fear of being judged. But the number one person who is judging you worse than anyone else is always yourself. So the first sounding exercise I always give people, and whether I call it voice vibration, sound and chakra energy healing, which is what I call it for my retreats that I run and my day workshops that I run and the deep sound healings I do with people, or whether I call it the 15-second stress reducer, which is what I call it when I go into banks and insurance companies. It's the same thing.
It's a bit like when you cook something and it doesn't turn out quite the way you wanted. It's like, no, it's not a cake, it's a big biscuit.
So the first exercise I always give is placing the hand on the heart, on the upper chest, closing eyes, breathing out, breathing in, and simply humming any note, any tone, and feeling the physical vibration of your voice wherever that sits in that moment. And that is always the first step. It's reconnecting people to realize that their voice is not just this thing that comes out of their mouth, that their voice is a part of the whole of who they are. And that can be really challenging. I mean, just doing the breath work,
well,
and breath work is its own whole.
It's awareness, isn't it? It's like, when I used to maybe teach yoga and people say, well, where am I meant to be feeling this? And I go, what? But I do get this because in hypnosis, if I'm running a hypnosis program, you obviously drop your voice. Drop your voice. There's a particular hypnotic voice where you can feel the vibration in your chest.
Yes.
And so it sounds to me what you're teaching them is also to be aware of where it is and how it feels in their body, not just the sound.
Yes. So it's building a whole new relationship with your voice, which, by the way, PS, shh, is building a whole new relationship with you. That's super scary. So it's building a whole new relationship with your voice. So just the humming, doesn't matter where, doesn't matter if it's, right? It doesn't have to be pretty. It's feeling that your voice is physiological and that it will vibrate in different spaces. Then the next step is I just get people to play with that hum. So we go up and down. That is really challenging for me. Oh no, it's embarrassing. Oh, high notes, low notes. Oh, judging. I can't hit notes. I can't
we
sing.
all have our range, don't we? It's like, I always remember going on, I think it was a sound healing program with Jonathan Goldman, someone else.
Yes.
And again, we had whole days of toning. And what was lovely was it doesn't matter where you come in, that you may be totally out of tune with the group. And this, I'm sure you find, I know you work one-on-one, but you also have your retreats and groups, that the group gets into resonance and that you don't know whether it's you humming and toning or whether it's someone else, because there's a kind of like, it just all blends together so beautifully and that happens so quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah, especially when you are open, when you've got over that judging yourself, because the judging creates tension. And where there's tension, the voice will, so your voice is a reflection of every thought or feeling, emotion or experience you have ever had, witnessed, or imagined. And so if you're thinking, oh God, I'm not hitting the notes, you're creating tension. And your vocal folds are muscles. And when there is tension, your muscles tighten. And when your vocal folds tighten, notes will go up and they won't be flowing as freely. So this is the most powerful thing, which is why vocal sound healing was the thing that completely changed my life and my relationship to my voice. And my voice has dropped, like you say, my voice has really dropped into a whole other space, is that sounding is not singing. And so many people go, oh, you're singing thing. I'm like, it's not singing. Singing has right and wrong notes. Sounding does not. Let go of judging. When you can let go of judging whether you sound pretty or nice or sexy, let go of what you think about your voice and just start to embrace your voice where it is. Doing the humming 30 seconds, a minute every day in the shower, you'll stop judging yourself, you'll stop laughing at yourself, you'll start enjoying it and playing with it. And before you know it, your range that might have been will suddenly be well, suddenly you start expanding your range because your voice, your vocal folds are a muscle. You've let go of the mental, emotional connection and tension and how you're judging yourself. And suddenly your voice is this tool that's also really beneficial for going really deep and releasing the emotional, energetic, physical pains that you might be holding on to. And so that's where vocal sounding gets really powerful.
Instrument, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, your voice is a beautiful musical instrument that can go high and it can go low, it can go loud, it can go soft, it can move yourself and other people in different directions through its tonality, through its cadence. So it's like learning to play an instrument, really, isn't it? Except it's your very own personal instrument.
Yeah. And you're in control. So what I love about sounding, when people come on the retreats, I always say to them, I give them the exercise. So they'll be doing, as we worked with Stuart, repeating the sound again and again. And we go, ha, 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 ha. And I'm talking a meditation over the top. And sometimes people will get emotional and they'll get frustrated. And this is my first experience of sound healing. I didn't even know it was sound healing. It was at drama school in a voice lesson. And it's not until 10 years later that I realized, when I was working with Stuart, that my voice teacher, who was doing this exercise with me, and I got so angry, and I just, and she's like, it's all right. It's just you're not used to letting people into hearing how you really feel. And that's when I burst into tears. 10 years later, I'm doing the work with Stuart, and I suddenly put 2 and 2 together and went, oh, she trained at Webber Douglas. He was head of voice at Webber Douglas. I was doing sound healing 10 years ago at drama school. I just didn't know it.
Wow. Wow. And then are you also, I would imagine, particularly during the group sessions, and retreats, when people are really embracing and embodying their voice, coming in as sort of timid with their voice and then really letting it out, that it also takes people into altered spaces and places.
Altered spaces and places, old hurts, pains, etc. So it can do both. And it depends where you're at in your journey and what chakra you're working on and what you need in that time. Some of the energy centers, we're sounding and people are like, oh my God, that was amazing. I went off into space. I was looking around. This one guy the other day started making, it was only his second time sounding, and he started making little tweeting sounds like a bird. And it was like, I was flying, I was soaring like an eagle. It's like, I love this stuff. And someone else in the same circle was curled up in a ball crying because it was, for her, it was resonating in old pain that she didn't realize she was still holding on to, because your voice vibration literally changes the vibration of your cells. And as
I was just going to ask you about what physical healings that you've witnessed. Yes, let's do that.
So exciting. So physical and emotional healing. The emotional stuff.
They're linked. They're linked. They're not
completely linked. No. So last year, I ran a very small proof of concept study with a doctor who used to be a GP. She had a practice as a GP. She's semi-retired. She's also a fellow at King's College, a research fellow. And she had really bad sciatica. This is sort of back in COVID. She and I went for a distanced walk together. And she was talking about her sciatic pain. I said, well, you could try sounding. And so we had a session. She was very skeptical. She had all her doctor science hat on. We did a sounding session. Her sciatic pain went from a 5 to a 0 in 2 places out of 10, and from 7 out of 10 to a 1 in another place in a 15-minute sounding. And I have the sounding process that I do with people. And she was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. So last year we did a small proof of concept study where there were people with chronic pain, because her research space is the link between emotional pain and physical pain. And there was one woman, she'd had pain in her shoulder for 20 years. She sounded it out and it went. 2 weeks later, I was like, how's the shoulder? She went, it hasn't come back. Other people who are living with fibromyalgia or ME, who were using it to reduce their pain and make them more able during the day and to take less medication. Did it clear their whole thing? No. Did it make their life so much easier? Yes. It was, I think, I should have the statistics in front of me, but if I remember correctly, it was 78% of reduction of people experienced at least a 50% reduction in pain.
I think there's a doctor, a chiropractor in the US. His name eludes me, and I know I wrote about him in one of my books, where he can align a spine by using specific sounds and frequencies, and he's got so good where he can just play a note on a keyboard and boof, it all kind of like aligns into place.
There's so much very high frequency sound is used by physiotherapists to help muscle tissue heal. So any of the top athletes, they will have ultra high frequency sound placed on to help their muscle tissue heal. There are some specific, and again, these are electronically created sounds, where they are using ultra high frequency sound to reduce some very specific types of cancer cells. Cancer Research UK are doing loads of research on this. Sound is an incredible, and obviously I can't say, your sound and I'm going to cure your cancer. That I am not saying that. But the ability to reduce the pain, to reduce the stress, to reduce the emotional connection between your emotional experiences and your physical pain is absolutely awesome. And breaking news, that doctor contacted me last week saying I might have some exciting research possibilities for the sounding process. So watch this space.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. And it also brought to mind that actually, when we're hurt, we do automatically go, I mean, if you stub your toe, it's like,
Yeah.
ow, 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 and you want to eat. I mean, you can't keep silent. You almost can't keep silent. Yet if you think about it, I don't know about you, but I was brought up in the age of children should be seen and not heard.
Mm-hmm.
Zip it. And also we've been
Don't
taught,
make a fuss.
yes, and don't cry, all the emotions to keep in, and to be stoic. So this, I think, perpetuates that people don't speak up and say what they want and say what they need, or, it's just all about suppression, isn't it? And even in school, if you want to speak or disagree with something, you put your hand up, but you may or may not be chosen. So we often don't get heard, and that also perpetrates, or leads to sort of a pattern to later. Yet the natural tendency, if something's wrong, or when we celebrate, it's yay and we
Yes.
cheer. I always remember going to my first concert when I was a teenager, and it was David Essex. So that shows how long ago it was. And of course, he was very gorgeous in those days. And
Yeah.
my friend and I were sort of at the back, and everybody was screaming so loudly, and we looked at each other and we went, ah. And then we suddenly let rip, and it was so liberating to scream, because again, you couldn't discern whether we were screaming or whether it was the people next to us.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about concerts and things where people sort of express themselves, the liberation, yet we're suppressed in so many different ways. And then you realize, as you've said, and from the studies, that it's actually, a release, it's healing.
Yes. And this is why, for example, there were studies done on Princess Diana's funeral, and everyone was mass grieving, and actually people were allowed to grieve and allowed to go, oh! Most of those people weren't grieving for her. They didn't know her, but it was an acceptable outlet of grief. And then if you look at other cultures where actually funerals are like massive, like ululating and grieving and celebrating and allowing, you just have to look at childbirth. And I've spoken to some doulas about creating a program there around encouraging women to feel more confident in their voice, so that in childbirth they can through the pain rather than which is a court sound.
Yes, the court sound, and what that does to the baby coming in.
Like allowing.
It comes down to, even, as I said, the tears. Most people have taught, don't cry. And yet I know when I work with people and there's tears there, I say, let it out. There's nobody else here. You have permission, because we often like, not now, I'm about to go into a meeting, push it down. Yeah.
And allowing that freedom, that release. And that's what it's all about. The voice is an amazing tool to help you recognize where there are blocks, challenges, or mental or emotional difficulties going on. Because if your voice gets stuck, is really, really soft, really, really quiet, or that you keep your voice really quiet because you don't want to say the wrong thing, or if there's a regular catch in your voice or there is tension in some way, your voice is an amazing tool to help you know where there is a problem.
Yes, exactly.
Also, the most spectacularly best tool to then, once you've recognized it, help release it, because through both sounding, so humming, then moving up into opening the voice, feeling your voice, building a different relationship with your voice. Your voice is then also the tool you can use to release that tension. And then you use the voice again to measure, because you go, actually, I went into this situation and I did the measuring myself years ago when I was still acting. There was a musical audition, and I'd been doing this work for about a year or two. And I thought, you know what, it's time I practice what I preach. I'm going to audition for a musical. Didn't expect to get it. I was way too young for the role I was going up for, but it was a fringe production, so they auditioned me. And I was like, right, I'm going to use these tools and techniques that I'm, telling other people they can go and speak up in their team meeting or their interview or their public speaking with less nerves. I did the exercises. I went into that audition and my knee didn't shake and my body didn't shake. And I sang the song well. My voice didn't waver because my body wasn't wavering. And I came out of there going, mission accomplished. It was the first audition for a musical I'd ever done where I hadn't been just absolutely tremoring, shaking, terrified beforehand. Ironically, I have done musicals, but with directors who I've worked with where they just caught me singing. They go, oh, I didn't know you could sing. I was like, oh, yeah, I can. Don't ask me to audition for you, but if you'd like me to sing with you. And there's the mental part of the voice. It's what are you thinking? What are you feeling? Because your voice is a reflection of your thoughts and feelings about yourself, about the situation you're in, and about the people you're with. And your voice is a reflection of your thoughts and feelings about yourself in relation to the situation you're in and or the people you're with. So if you like the people you're with and you feel comfortable in the situation and you're thinking, okay, this is good. Yeah, this is great. Okay, I can go into my team, I can deliver this presentation, or I can talk about my business in this networking group because actually I know it's a safe space and they're lovely people. Great. Someone hears your presentation and says, that was brilliant. Could you do that to the board tomorrow, please? Suddenly the situation is different, the people are different, and you're like, and your voice will reflect those challenges. And that's the work that really then, that's the mindset part. So there's the physiological part through humming, sounding, healing, and then the mindset piece of how are you thinking and feeling about yourself and having control over that so that your voice doesn't take you over or your lack of voice doesn't make you feel lesser, and that you can start
no longer judging yourself, and the liberation that comes when you can be your authentic self without any fear of being judged and just being who you are.
And the possibilities then are endless.
Well, the doors widen.
Because the doors are open. And this is why I say one of my key phrases is when you liberate your voice, you will liberate your life. And people say, how? I'm like, because you will put yourself forward for opportunities that you never did before.
Totally.
And you will start setting boundaries with people. And you will start allowing yourself to take up time and space and the liberation that comes. So the possibilities are boundless.
So people can get started straight away by simply humming in the shower and extending their range. How can they get in contact with you? Because I know that you work one-on-one, and I'm assuming that means you can also work online, very much so.
Yes.
And you're based in the UK, but you run retreats not only in the UK, in other parts of the world as well. So how do people get in touch with you, Judith?
The best way is through my website, which is yourwholevoice.com. And if you want to follow me on socials, on Instagram and Facebook, that's at Your Whole Voice, or on LinkedIn, it's Judith Quin Vocal Confidence. And on my website, there's links to I've got free online video courses there. You can buy my book. Like, if you just want a little taster, go to my YouTube channel and there's tons of videos of me doing various things with sound and voice and poems and all sorts. So your whole voice.
You're a wonderful poet as well. Another way of expression. Okay, and I like the fact that people can get started immediately, not just with the humming in the shower, but there's plenty of things on your YouTube channel. There's plenty of freebies on your website, as well as the opportunity to work with you personally. Judith, it's been a joy to see you and hear your voice. I look forward to toning with you very soon. Thank you so much for being part of the Possibility Hub.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you for tuning into this episode with my guest Judith Quin, and I highly recommend you go to her website, yourwholevoice.com, and discover more about your powerful voice. As always, I'm thrilled to be sharing possibilities with you. And remember, if you want more, then check out the link at thepossibilityhub.com. And if you feel that others can benefit from listening in, then please go ahead and share, review, like, or follow me on Instagram, Carol K. Talbot, or check my YouTube channel. And remember, you're always more than you think you are.